RPN, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.
This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Want a patch? Want a plaque? Want to help support this show? Find out how and add your support at patreon.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 310, Tribunal.
Welcome into Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ken Ray. Each week, we watch a thing, then talk about the thing we watched, sizing it up for meanings and morals and things like that.
This week, premiere of an Archon. Miles O'Brien is hauled before a tribunal. I've got trivia coming up in a bit, but first,
I'm going to let you know how to get in touch with us. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we would love to hear your voice. 323-522-5641 is the phone number to call, 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. You say Miles O'Brien is hauled before a tribunal, do you, John?
Yeah, it is a tribunal, and oddly enough, that's the name of the episode.
The name of the episode is Tribunal. Okay.
Yes.
It's not Premiere of an Archon.
No. Even though there is an Archon in here.
There is an Archon. It's the return of the phrase Archon.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So very exciting Trek tie-ins. Hey, I can give you more Trek tie-ins in the trivia.
Why don't you?
Okay. Today's episode, Tribunal, was written by Bill Dial. Just one credit for the story and the teleplay this week. Now, Bill, we've actually mentioned before because he is a person of many talents. Now, he wrote a previous episode of Deep Space Nine we talked about. That would be The Alternate, also known as The Alternate. So you may remember him from that. And you may also remember that Bill actually was well known for working on WKRP in Cincinnati. He was an actor and a writer and story editor. Now, this episode was directed by, wait for it, Avery Brooks. Now, this is his first directorial credit for TV, though he has a theater background and he is directed there too. His only TV or film directing credits are, in fact, Deep Space Nine. So this is the first time on DS9 that a cast member has directed, going back to that model that was established in Next Gen, the Star Trek Directors School, and Avery was its first beneficiary here. Ken, you mentioned the Archon.
I did.
Yeah, well, I don't think we addressed what an Archon is way back when we talked about Return of the Archons. So go back about 2,700 years, if you would.
Oh, it only feels like it was that long ago, John.
Well, I'm talking about going back to ancient Greece.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, not just the TOS Season 1. Go back to ancient Greece and you will find, many changes in the political structure there. So power from a king shifted to magistrates who oversaw, all kinds of different things in Greek society. The military, festivals, and social life. You had a chief magistrate to oversee those, and many more. These were the Archons. So that's where the word comes from. And yes, see also Return of the Archons, original series, Season 1. We have a line here, confession is good for the soul. Well, you may have heard that one before. It in fact did not originate on Cardassia. As far as we know, it's from the 19th century, probably Scottish. There's not a really solid lock on exactly where that originated. Now, we have our first look in this episode at Cardassia Prime, and that means a whole new matte painting to celebrate. Now, it was augmented here with video inserts when we see state-run TV, kind of a cool effect, and the credit for that painting goes to Richard Stromberg. We have a reference to Minezaki Koto. A quick reference at the beginning to this Japanese composer at the start of the episode. And he was primarily composing in the 1790s in Osaka. He was blind, and he worked in traditional Japanese chamber music, usually performed by a trio. And one of his better-known pieces, Setting Moon, was written in honor of a student who died too young, and it's a rumination about the transient nature of life. So I guess not a bad theme for O'Brien to pick to play for Keiko while they're on their way to the vacation. Now, there's lots of name-checking in this episode back to Setlick 3 and the Rutledge. That, of course, takes us back to the TNG episode The Wounded, where we met O'Brien's former captain, Benjamin Maxwell. And we have a name-check to the Enterprise, whose story, by the way, in the production and air date chronology ended last week with the airing of All Good Things. Plus, we have the Prokofiev and the Valdemar. So we have a reference here to early 20th century Russian composer Sergei Prokofiev, who, among other works, composed Peter and the Wolf. And then we have Valdemar Poulsen. That is the namesake for the third ship named. He was a Danish engineer working primarily in broadcast technology. He came up with the magnetic wire recorder, the precursor to the tape recorder. Let's talk guest stars. So returning this week as Gul Evek as Richard Poe. And of course, Keiko is back, played by Rosalind Chow. The mysterious Raymond Boone is played by John Beck. His name may not be the most recognizable, but he has a pretty impressive resume. He worked steadily since the 1960s, many guest roles on prominent shows, and he was the star of the 1978 TV movie of The Time Machine. Appearances on The Love Boat and Fantasy Island followed. He even appeared in a bit role in Star Trek IV as a waiter. In feature films, just a few standouts I have to mention. He was in Woody Allen's Sleeper. He was in Norman Jewison's Rollerball. And you have no idea how happy I am to finally work in a reference to the 1976 film The Big Bus, in which he played the driver named Shoulders. Makbar, the chief archon of the Cardassian court, is played by Caroline Lagerfeld. Like many on DS9, her career started on the stage before transitioning to film and TV, and she has had many prominent roles. She had recurring spots on Gossip Girl, Beverly Hills 90210, and Nash Bridges. She was in the movie Minority Report, and she racked up guest appearances on T.J. Hooker, The Equalizer, ER, The X-Files, and many more. Finally, the great Fritz Weaver is here as Conservator Kovat. He's an actor who worked steadily from the 1950s until he passed away in 2016. Marathon Man, The Thomas Crown Affair, The X-Files, yes, even The Love Boat. Seems like he was in everything, and especially genre productions. He was a guest on Wonder Woman. He was in the Crate segment of 1982's Creep Show. And he was even the first bad guy on the very first episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. named The Vulcan Affair. Appropriate to this episode, he was the judge in the original Twilight Zone episode, The Obsolete Man. This was Fritz's only Star Trek appearance.
Keiko and Miles are going on a trip. I feel certain it will be free of incident, and that they will have a lovely time. What could possibly go wrong?
Prologue. Miles O'Brien and Keiko are headed out for a vacation, but not until Miles can annoy every one of his co-workers with last-minute details. On his way down the promenade to the shuttle, he bumps into an old crewmate, Raymond Boone. They were on the Rutledge together during the war with the Cardassians. Boone is a little aloof, but they promise to catch up some other time as Miles runs off to join Keiko. Boone slips away into a dark room, though, where he plays back a recording of the conversation he just had with the chief. Act 1. Miles O'Brien isn't one who decompresses easily. He brought tech manuals with him, while Keiko has served up lunch and distracts him away from business with a little flirtation. They're interrupted, though, by a Cardassian ship commanded by Gul Evek. He states that they have 10 seconds to come to a stop and allow an inspection team aboard, or else. When the Cardassians beam over, Evek tells O'Brien that he's under arrest for something. He's not saying what, and Miles has no way of denying charges he doesn't understand. He'll be taken to Cardassia Prime to stand trial, while Keiko is taken back to DS9. When Miles tries to fight back, he's stunned by a weapon and beamed out. Act 2. The torture begins. Miles O'Brien, Chief of Operations at DS9, is stripped, restrained, injected, sampled. He even has a molar removed by his Cardassian captors for their identification bureau. He's trying all he can not to break, not volunteering any information other than his name and rank. In walks an apologetic Cardassian woman, Makbar, the chief Archon. She says she wants him to be comfortable, as he'll stand trial in 2 days. In the meantime, he can meet his lawyer, the conservator Kovat. On DS9, Keiko is worried about Miles. Sisko says Starfleet has dispatched 3 ships to the DMZ, but she knows that he's being tortured. Odo assumes as much too, knowing Cardassian ways. Sisko's hands are a bit tied, though. They don't know where Miles is exactly, and they can't just go barging in. What's that? A call from Cardassia Prime? Sure, we'll take it on speakerphone. It's Makbar, and she says Miles is fine. He's standing trial in a couple of days, and he'll be executed, because the guilty verdict is already predetermined. Keiko is welcome to come watch, though. It's a very efficient system. Odo, knowing a thing or two about Cardassian law, pipes up that he'd like to be there too. Makbar says that privilege is only reserved for officers of the court, but oh, guess what? Odo is one because of Gul Dukat. Fine then. He'll be a Nestor to the accused. Odo and Keiko leave for Cardassia Prime, like now. Sisko turns to Kira that he wants her to investigate any of O'Brien's recent activity on the station. There must be some details they can turn up, even if the chief's attitude about Cardassians might lead them to information they don't want to know. Act 3. Time for Miles to meet his court-appointed conservator, a gentleman named Kovat. Kovat explains what's happening here. The accusation, the crime, guilt or innocence, none of that matters. The outcome has been predetermined because on Cardassia, trials serve the purpose of reassuring the people that their system works. That's all. O'Brien says he views their proceedings with contempt, and Kovat says to keep that up. It'll make for a great show. At least Kira is looking for evidence. In a weapons locker on DS9, she notes that the photon warheads from a number of torpedoes have been removed. Furthermore, the space occupied by the warheads has been replaced by something inert, a trick you can pull off if you are really good at transporters. Well, that implicates one chief of operations we all know. The other thing that implicates him? The voice print saying, "This is Miles O'Brien," that would have gotten him into the weapons locker. It's not looking good. So why would he do it? Well, the Maquis stole a bunch of photon launchers a couple of weeks ago, so here's some missing warheads. Was Miles really delivering them on the runabout he and Keiko were using for their getaway? And who was waiting to take delivery? Odo has arrived to see Miles. It's not the rescue Miles was hoping for. In fact, Odo goes into full Odo mode, asking all kinds of questions. Does he know anyone in the Maquis? Has he supplied weapons to anyone in the Maquis? Why was he in weapons locker 4? The Cardassians did find something on the shuttle, but he has no idea what or how anything got there. O'Brien says he's just a loyal Starfleet officer trying to do his best every day, and he doesn't understand why he's here, now, accused of a crime. Odo says he'll be there on the defense team, and he expects Miles to have the clear, unwavering eyes of an innocent man. Act 4. That voice print was a fake. It was Miles's voice, but it was a mashup. That's what Dax has determined. Here's something else to chew on. Kira has narrowed down any of the Maquis who were recently on DS9 to one man, Raymond Boone. There are 3 people on the promenade who saw Boone talking to O'Brien right before O'Brien left. Time to bring him in for questioning. Now it's time for the trial to begin. Miles is brought in, and he says he is not pleading guilty. Next comes Keiko, who announces to the Archon that she will in no way testify against her husband. Odo throws the proceedings for a loop when he asks to address the conservator and relay that he's got the scoop on the doctored audio. Well, that simply won't do. No new evidence can be admitted after a sentence has been passed. Odo is there, like Kovat, to put on a good show. And if Odo does this again, he'll be held in contempt. No new evidence. So says the Archon. Sisko and Kira begin questioning Boone on DS9. He's not exactly torn up about Miles's predicament. Suspicious enough, Sisko asks him to be held. Later, Bashir enters his lab and the lights aren't working. It's the perfect mysterious setting for a shadowy figure from the Maquis to creep up and tell the doctor that Boone is not from the Maquis, and he's also not one of us. Act 5. Gul Evek appears live via satellite in court to present his evidence. He's got it all from unnamed reliable sources that the warheads found on the runabout were about to be delivered to the Maquis in the DMZ. How did he know? Well, that's a matter of national security. Okay, thanks, bye. Things haven't slowed down on DS9. Sisko brings Boone into the medical lab. A few more questions. Why hasn't Boone talked to his parents in 8 years? Or his wife? And where has he been since Setlik 3? The trial resumes, and Kovat's appeal to Miles to just confess, for the sake of the show, of course, goes unmet. So he tries a new course. Maybe abuse from his parents. Maybe from his spouse. He's trying to create a narrative about the criminal mind, and it's just not working. The Archon takes over, though, prodding O'Brien for how many Cardassians he's killed. Not now, but during the war. He did kill, didn't he? And what about now? Doesn't he still hate Cardassians? Hasn't he said they can't be trusted? He admits it. That's just the opening Kovat needs to concede the trial, but Miles does not. Just then the door opens and in walks Raymond Boone, followed by Sisko. When the Archon sees him, she's ready to hand down the sentence. The court will show mercy by handing Miles O'Brien back to Commander Sisko. More shocked than anyone else seems to be Kovat, who, sadly, has won his first case. And so close to retirement, too. On the runabout back home, Sisko explains that in the examination, Boone was revealed to be a Cardassian who was surgically altered to look like and replace the late Raymond Boone, who was killed at Setlik 3. The trial wasn't about O'Brien. It was about some Cardassians trying to set up Starfleet to make it look like they were behind arming the Maquis. It's over now, and Sisko insists that Miles and Keiko finally take the vacation they deserve. The end.
All right, let's start at the start.
Okay.
It never occurred to me until this viewing, no one on Deep Space Nine, with the exception of Sisko, has a second. O'Brien's telling Sisko and Kira and Dax how to do various aspects of his job. And I was like, why isn't he telling his assistant? And it's because he doesn't have one. But nobody does, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now, in fairness, the last time he had an assistant, that assistant tried to assassinate Bareil.
Oh, okay. All right. Bad choice.
Yeah, but still, I mean, I understand there are only 300 people. But again, there is so much room on Deep Space Nine. I think each one of those people could have another person.
Yeah, you can chalk up the thing with the assassin to like an HR error. But everybody else, like, Dax can step in for medical stuff every now and then, but that's not really her calling. So, yeah, you need other people. Right.
He's chief of operations, and or chief engineer, rather. But, I mean, it's not hard to be the chief engineer when you're apparently the only engineer there.
Right.
Because he's spending all of his time going, you, the military person, I need to tell you about this thing that's not working. And you, science officer, need to tell you how to restart these spark plugs or whatever I do over here. And he's apparently, schooling Sisko on how to do his job. And I'm thinking he needs like another engineer. Just one, for when he goes away.
He does. Yeah. And actually, speaking of that, I mean, sure, everybody wants Miles to leave already. They want him to get out of there. But I'm thinking the things that he's saying, as you point out, he has no second in command. He has no assistant. Right. What if those things are really important?
Yeah.
Like, he didn't get to finish saying what that new subroutine in the habitat ring was all about. So what if that subroutine is like, at 9 o'clock, all the oxygen is going to be sucked out through an airlock?
You know, that actually would have been a fascinating thing to see. Like nothing actually happens to O'Brien the whole time he's gone. The whole thing just becomes them coming to appreciate what Miles actually does. Right? Because they're like, this stuff practically runs itself, doesn't it? And then he's gone for like 6 hours. And it turns out, no.
Yeah, no, because the replicators are still full of Cardassian vols, as far as we know.
Yep, there you go. That's what he's been spending most of his time doing, as a matter of fact, yeah.
Speaking of no seconds, as we are, where's Keiko been? Because I worry about the school children on board DS9, and it's just like you announced about 6 months ago, oh, yeah, she's visiting her parents, and just not to be seen again until it's time to take a vacation. So, you know...
I don't think I like what you're accusing her of, mister.
I just look. I get it's the pretense of TV that we have our main characters, but we have important secondary characters like you got a Jake who we see every now and then.
I'm sorry, who?
You got a here's another name, Nog. You seen that guy in a while?
Nog. Doesn't ring a bell.
I know. Yeah. So, and how about their vacation? So Miles brought so many tech manuals. Yeah. And again, I'd just like to point out a separate pad for every manual.
Oh, they were so close, though. They were so close. I mean, they really were. They were so close because, I mean, you're right. It's an individual iPad for each thing, right? And they didn't, I mean, they were so close on that. I mean, I'm still pretty impressed because if he had brought like an encyclopedia, it still would have been on one pad. They were just so close to what the future was going to be on that whole thing. So, yeah. I can't blame him for that. Shades of Scotty, by the way. I think it was The Trouble with Tribbles. I can't remember. But there was an episode where Scotty had to be confined to his quarters. I want to say it was for starting that fight that is still going on K7.
Yeah, right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and he was confined to his quarters, and he was stoked because it meant more time to read his technical manuals. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now here's another chief engineer. Yeah, hey, great. I got like a week. Yes, I'm going to read technical manuals and also talk to what's her name? I know. It starts with a hard C sound. I think it's a K. I'm not 100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was a really fantastic thing. Look, it's gonna sound like I'm bashing their relationship. Let me go ahead and say something good about their relationship in this episode.
Yeah.
I like the kiss.
Okay.
I like the kiss between the two of them. It was and I don't know, honestly, I had a debate with a friend of mine. I don't know if it was, that they had done that scene so many times that they were punchy. Mm-hmm. Because the giggling and it felt so real. It felt almost more real than anything that we've seen between the two of them, that it kind of felt like they must have done that take like 9 times. 9 times? 9 times to get that level of comfort and also goofiness. I really like that scene though. I like that part.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to go back to bashing them.
Okay.
Maybe we should have brought Molly with us. Do you think she'll be okay with the Petersons, says Miles. And Keiko says she likes the Petersons more than she likes us. And I'm thinking, well, who can blame her?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for saying what I was thinking. Okay. Yes. Good.
No problem at all.
Good call. Hey, I have to point out there's some food in this episode. A little bit of food on the shuttle. Keiko, first of all, she has a space placemat that she brought. Very glad to see that. Kind of a shiny, sparkly purple thing. Very nice. And it looks like the bowls have some veggies in them. I'm going to guess eggplant, some zucchini. I'm hoping some of that is tempura fried. Sort of looks like that. So I'm in favor of all of that.
And they didn't even touch it.
No.
Yeah.
That was really the worst part of the episode for me. I didn't get to live through their enjoyment of that spread. Odo, by the way, still just right there with the Odo bedside manner we've come to expect. Keiko's like, I'm terrified that they're torturing my husband. And Sisko's, well, wow, so we really don't know. And Odo's like, yeah, pretty much torture. That's what's going on. So... And then the Cardassians, it's like we hear a couple of times said to Miles, remove your clothes. And then he doesn't comply. And then the clothes are forcibly ripped from Miles. And then a minute later, Archon comes in, here are your clothes. So I'm just going to call it the Cardassians are just into some weird stuff.
They are.
Yeah.
It's true. With that bright light as well, which I understand. I mean, it's all about intimidation. I get that.
Sure.
Although I thought you saved the bright light for the actual interrogation, not the,
Yeah.
not just the telling people what to do. But,
I mean, again, weird stuff. That's what they're into.
I guess that's what it is. Interesting when Kovat is talking to Miles during the trial. I'm going back to what I was doing a minute ago, by the way, when he's like, were you abused as a child? What about spousal abuse? Was your wife causing you, severe psychological distress? And O'Brien says, I love my parents. And in fairness to my wife, I leave my socks everywhere. So, I had it coming. Let's be honest.
There is a great delivery of a line here when Makbar, the Archon, says to Sisko, I see you live up to your reputation. And he says, that's right, I do. That's just, that's a great line, delivered well, I thought.
I don't even care what you think my reputation is.
Yeah, I precisely.
Absolutely, I do. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And you just admit to it as well. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Wait, what is my reputation exactly?
Doesn't matter. Own it.
All right. There you go. Yeah. Something a little bit troubling about this episode, and I don't think it's going to surprise anybody that I'm troubled by it, but we also don't really explore it that much, and I'm troubled by that too. Yeah. The Maquis are deep enough in Deep Space Nine that they know what's going on in Deep Space Nine enough to go, hey, we need to wave them off this whole Boone thing because he's not one of ours.
Yeah, that is some deep cover stuff. Because the Cardassian conspiracy we get, they manufactured it, they put the guy there, so that's fine. But for the actual Maquis to know what's going on, and remember, there's only a handful of people who are working on this at this point. You got Sisko, you got Kira, you got Dax, you got Bashir, and that's it. Again,
you got a small number of people on DS9. Yeah. So they're that deeply embedded in that small an organization, yet it can't be tracked.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, precisely.
That's fine.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just going to mention here, going to plant this early on, that if rebuilding someone's body into an entirely different species is possible in the future, maybe, just maybe, transporters should have some kind of verification built in.
Maybe.
Maybe we'll never see that again in a future Star Trek. Maybe that's just a thing that'll never happen again.
Yeah. Who cares about the Dominion? I'm sorry. Who cares about shapeshifters? Seriously, if everybody can do this, then what's the big deal about a shapeshifter? It's like, oh, yeah, really? Yeah, I built 3 just like you last week. So you're not scaring me.
Yeah, Dr. Crusher turned you into a Romulan 1 week, back to human the next,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cardassians can make a perfect human out of a Cardassian. Yeah, good enough to fool his wife and his parents. Okay.
Man, yeah, that's a lot of belt sanding and stuff that I want to know about.
Indeed. Yeah. At least they didn't have to take out an extra heart, though.
Yeah, that's true. Boy, that would be rough. That would be rough. You're a Klingon. Oh,
I
a lot
don't
of
think
work.
Anybody could do that.
No, that's too much work. Security thing to point out. Let's get this memo to Odo. It just takes a voice print to get into the room where they keep the photon warheads.
Yeah.
Let's maybe beef that up. I'm going to suggest a password or a PIN number.
2-factor authentication is your best friend.
Something you know and something you have. Those are the two things.
There you go. Speaking of which, good job, Odo. Way to, let's mount cameras in Quarks. But let's not put one outside the weapons locker for Deep Space Nine.
Right. Yes.
Well, Quark's up to something. What could the weapons possibly be up to? Okay, I see you're thinking, but it's not really the weapons that we're worried about. It's people accessing the weapens. Oh, wow. Yeah. Never thought about that. See, I used to just keep people with clubs outside of the weapons locker, back in the Cardassian days.
Yeah, you just crack the skull. And
exactly. Sometimes it was the guy coming to relieve the next guy. And you felt kind of bad.
Yeah, but he looked at you funny.
Yeah, well, it kept order. It kept order, and that's really what it's all about.
Odo says to Miles, when he's trying to talk him through this show trial, hey, look, some of the great figures of history have been accused of crimes. And I thought, oh, this episode missed the perfect opportunity to play at our favorite Star Trek meme, which is you name two real things from history, and then you throw in a fake science fiction one. So the great figures who have been accused of crimes, you could say, like Galileo and Martin Luther King and Garlock of Zebulon 4. Totally missed it.
If man ever does colonize the stars, finding new worlds to call home across the cosmos, will we change Earth's name to Earth Prime?
So continuing our analysis of Odo, we know that when a Cardassian trial begins, somebody's going to be found guilty. In fact, they've already been found guilty, otherwise there'd be no trial. And we've heard that before, not just in this episode, we've heard that before when we're dealing with Cardassians, right? Odo was an officer of the Cardassian court, which basically means Odo was an instrument of Cardassian justice.
Yeah.
Discuss.
Well, remember it was this last week that we were talking about Odo being a little sanctimonious about those who collaborated with the Cardassians.
Right.
Odo should find himself very firmly on that list. Odo's ties with the Cardassians go a little deeper every time we dig a little more.
Right. And yet he can somehow find it in his heart to bash somebody else who actually sold out their people to the Cardassians. Now, in fairness, Odo didn't sell out his people to the Cardassians.
Well, he doesn't have any.
He just sold out people. Right.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing.
Yeah. But do we just assume that in the last few years Odo has had a change of heart, or he's just he likes now getting a regular paycheck from Starfleet or whomever is supporting him, the Bajorans?
Well, I mean, you can say that, except again for the part where he was all over the collaborator, the first of many collaborators in last week's episode, the collaborator.
Right.
He was all over that guy, right? Like, yeah, you sold out your people. Well, look in a mirror. I mean, I'm just saying. And wait, make your face look like me first, then look in a mirror, because, you're basically talking about yourself, kind of.
Whatever form you want to take. Look in a mirror.
Except, of course, he wasn't selling out, again, his people. But it's just weird, too. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff in this episode that made me think of other pop culture, kind of satire, almost. So I thought of the movie The Running Man. You've seen it? Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Have I seen it? Oh, man, I love that movie. Seriously. Of course. And it's bad, and I still love it.
It's bad, but it's wonderful. And, of course, the late, great Richard Dawson. And the things that I thought of with that vis-a-vis this episode, or just the idea that it's all about the show. The show is important because the show is what helps to mold society.
Yeah.
And that movie, for those in our audience who haven't seen it, it is a wonderful piece of satire about pop culture, about the power of TV, about media, about the ability to manipulate those things in order to shape public opinion. And that's what this episode does very nicely. Less extreme, but that is certainly a touch point that I found. So it sounded like you were about to say something there.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, it's some amazing performances in that movie and some really terrible performances as well in that movie.
Oh, wait, sure.
But Richard Dawson, seriously, was incredible on that, because he had always been kind of like, fun and cute. And he was just, man, he was brutal in that movie, and just wonderful in that movie.
He's sort of the Kovat in the respect that he's dedicated to the point of what they're doing, except that Richard Dawson is in that movie just kind of purely evil, completely blinded by what they're doing.
Well, I'm curious, because Richard Dawson knew that everything that they were doing in The Running Man was, spoiler, by the way, the movie did come out, 87, I think. So
something like that.
Yeah, we're talking like 30 years later. So if you haven't seen it, I'm going to put it on you. But I'm also going to give you like another 3 seconds before I say Richard Dawson knew that everything that he said was a lie.
Yeah.
Do you think Kovat does?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
Because I think it's impossible to answer, and that's okay for an episode like this. Look, so many people that we've met from Cardassia who are so dedicated to the system of Cardassia, whether it's Garak or Dukat or the Archon in this episode or Kovat, they pour everything they have into maintaining the structure of the Cardassian system. Mm-hmm. And whether or not it's true with a capital T at the end of the day is academic, because that it misses the point of what they're trying to do.
That's true for a lot of them. I would say that is not true for the Archon, because the Archon knew the second Boone came in that the jig was up. The Archon knew that, they were actually up to some dirty dealings, that it was like the Section 31 version, maybe, of Cardassia that had done that. Everybody else, though, I mean, you can go back to the conversations between Garak and Bashir, right? Like, anytime Bashir says, don't people have a right to, find out who they are for themselves? And Garak will say something along the lines of a Federation ideal if ever there was one. Yeah, right. I mean, the Cardassian, the whole Cardassian thing is about the wheels turning and the gears not coming to a halt on Cardassia. Yeah. In fact, I had an idea, and I'm curious what you think of it.
Okay.
You could boil the Cardassian system of jurisprudence into one single phrase.
Okay.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one.
Ouch,
dude.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't like it. Don't misunderstand. I mean, I'm not saying it's right, and yet you can make the case, I think. And of course, on Cardassia, that case would absolutely fly. Mm-hmm. Or on Cardassia Prime, anyway. I can't speak for all the Cardassias, but on Cardassia Prime. I think they would agree with that phrase.
Yeah, frighteningly so. But again, we might be saying that they would live up to the letter of that law rather than truly the spirit of that law. That's rough. But he even says it. Kovat says it. On Cardassia, all crimes are solved, all criminals are punished, all endings are happy. Even the poorest of our subjects can walk the streets in the dead of night in perfect safety. Mm-hmm. Well, there you have it. It's the needs of the many that are all being served by their total dedication to the state. And it's this idea that even if it's a lie, it's okay because it makes people feel good about themselves. Put a pin in that. I might come back to that at the end of our episode today.
Here's the thing, though. It's not a lie as far as Kovat knows. Because I mean, this is the thing. They went to a lot of trouble here, right? I mean, so Boone actually did break into the weapons locker. Mm-hmm. Actually did get those weapons onto the shuttle. Mm-hmm. The Cardassians then actually did find the weapons on the shuttle. So it sure looks like Miles is guilty. Now, there is a segment of whatever's going on there. Like, I find it hard to believe that everybody was in on that. Like, I don't think Kovat had any idea who Boone was. I was surprised, honestly, to find that the Archon knew who Boone was. But Kovat had no idea who Boone was. Kovat, I don't think, was in on it. Kovat's job is to be a sycophant. Kovat's job is to say Cardassia for the Cardassians. Kovat's job is to say our system works, and you know how our system works? Because our system works. Right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, and that's so. I mean, it's when you say it's a lie. I mean, yes, in this particular case, it's a lie, and it's probably a lie a lot of times. But I don't think most people involved actually know that. One of the most chilling things in this episode, there are 3 kids in the courtroom. They're kids. And I would imagine that there are always kids in the courtroom. And I don't think these kids have anything to do with what's going on. I think those kids are there to see that the Cardassian system works. And if there's ever a time in their teens, in their 20s, and their 30s and beyond that they're wondering, does the system work? They're going to remember that time that they sat in the court and saw that horrible traitor to Cardassia whatever he did, whoever it was, Miles this week, some guy who was jaywalking next week, maybe some kid from another planet who accidentally stepped on flowers.
Oh, that kid had it coming.
They're going to remember.
Yeah.
They're going to remember that the system works. I mean, the repetitive... Look, I've had a lot of bad things to say about Deep Space Nine. I am loving what's happening with the Cardassians. They are such a well-realized society. They're terrible. Mm-hmm. They're horrible to deal with. They're very bad neighbors.
But it's very convincing.
Oh, man. I mean, what they got, what the writers have going here with their court system, what the writers have going here with their repetitive epics. I mean, if they don't, they know the Cardassian system. It's an amazing thing to watch sort of evolve.
I'll say it right now. I like them better than Klingons. Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably because they got to start from scratch, right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, TNG got to start from scratch. They weren't, I mean, with the Klingons, it's sort of like in the 80s when they were starting again with Star Trek, right? Going into TNG, or maybe even a little bit before that in the movies. You kind of had to look at it and go, we basically had clowns as our enemies. Let's try to toughen those guys up a little bit, but it still comes off kind of weird. The Cardassians are just, scary from the word go.
Yeah. I will say this about Kovat. You're right. His job is to be a sycophant. He's not dumb. He's good at his job. He is willfully ignorant about the idea that there could be other evidence to exonerate Miles. And I would say that in his decades-long career of doing this, there have to have been other examples where that came up where he did the same thing. So I think at a certain point, he has to know that even if it isn't this case, there are times when he has essentially had to lie or allow the lie of omission for the state.
Except he, at one point, was probably one of those kids sitting in the courtroom seeing that the system always works. Mm-hmm. I mean, I get what you're saying. There's almost no doubt that he has been part of a trial where the person who was found guilty was not, in fact, guilty. The question I have, though, is would a Cardassian who is charged for something they didn't actually do sit there and go, well, I probably had it coming for some reason? Because it's for Cardassia, right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's possible. Yes, it's possible that half the people that go through the system are not guilty, except that, I must be guilty because this system works. And we know the system works because I remember, reading 27 books, each 7 volumes, all about how, the system works. Plus, I remember that time I was a kid and I watched the system work. So maybe I even did it. Heck, I don't know. Well,
so what would be interesting is what happens to Kovat next, because now his faith has been shaken, and I like this, that we see cracks in the monoculture. So we've met some good Cardassians like Maritza in Duet, and we've seen Gul Dukat have his faith shaken a bit. So you come back to Kovat a year later, 10 years later, he's retired, hopefully. He's like, oh man, but that one time that was a show trial, but in the worst sense of the word. So, I wondered, I believe his last line was, they're going to kill me. Yeah, which may very well be literal as well as figurative. Right, because I was wondering if, so he's fine, and, it was the Archon who decided, no, he gets to be like, go, but then 6 months from now is that, that case was botched by the conservator, and then a year from now, the conservator was found to be in league with Miles, and then he is put to death. Yeah. Maybe, because, of course, he's a failing in the system, and the system works. Yeah. Well, here's a question from a different angle. Since this is about Miles, does he get any growth in this episode? So he fought in the war. He hated Cardassians at the time, but he's cooled off a bit because he realizes the war is over and they're just people at the end of the day. He's doing the right thing by what we hope would happen to these people who went through this terrible experience. But now they've captured him, tortured him, tried to use him as an example. So the next time he says he hates or doesn't trust Cardassians, can we cut him some slack? You know, I'm not saying that literally to me and you.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious because he's the guy who has had more experience than anybody except for Kira.
Right.
You know, he's been in the thick of it. Mm-hmm. And when you cut to Miles saying like, oh, you can't trust them. They're terrible. They did all these awful things. Well, we can go like, yeah. And now that's happened to you twice in however many years that you've been in this situation with Cardassians. So, yeah, we can keep saying the war is over, you get to grow past it. Oh, but every time you happen to have an encounter, it's absolutely awful.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do kind of wonder about what he said to Boone when he thought he was talking to Boone. You know, the whole thing about, Boone's like, yeah, so I'm living on this planet. And Miles is like, wow, isn't that on the Cardassian side of stuff? And Boone's like, yeah, you know, but it's fine. They leave me alone. And Miles is like, wow, I don't think I could do that. So I'm just going to stand 6 feet over the line from where the Cardassians are, which is kind of where he's put himself. So I'm not saying, I mean, do you cut him some slack? Sure, I guess so. Yes. I mean, I don't see how you couldn't, because he is he's once again a recent victim of a recent atrocity.
Yeah.
You kind of have to question why he would leave himself in that situation. But of course, the reason you leave him in that situation is because we're writing Deep Space Nine. We want Cole Meany to have a prominent role on that show. So that's where he's going to be.
Yeah.
Speaking of the conversation Miles was having with Boone when he thought it was Boone, did Sisko do the right thing turning Boone over to the Cardassians? Fake Boone, imitation Boone, now with less Boone?
I think so. I think Sisko knows that everything with the Cardassians right now is a bit tenuous, given the demilitarized zone, given the Maquis, given everything that has led up to this point. Mm-hmm. I think this is about as cool as you can play it. By just standing in the corner, just sort of standing in the back of the room, waving and going, we got your guy. We got your guy. He's right here. Mm-hmm. Without turning it into an interplanetary incident. Now, of course, there will be a report written. Starfleet will know what happened. You can just file that away for the next time this kind of thing comes up. But what of Boone at that point? Well, Boone will either be executed by the Cardassians for failing at his job, or Boone will retire somewhere looking conspicuously human among a bunch of other Cardassians, unless he can go back to the guy who can reverse the plastic surgery he had.
Yeah, you see, I don't know that they did right by turning him back over to the Cardassians. Because at this point, now they have nothing over the Cardassians. Right? We know what you did, but we gave you the guy that would prove that you did what you did, so now I got nothing. Right? Bringing him to the court is fine. I mean, it's a real Frank Pentangeli moment, right? Or Frank Pentangeli's brother, anyway.
Yeah.
They see the thing. They decide, okay, we can't do this because then everything's going to come out. You don't show your cards, right? And then leave it all there. I think you take Boone back, because now the Cardassians just get away with it. And I don't quite understand that. I mean, and you could either use that as leverage, like Sisko could use that as leverage against the Cardassians the next time, they come knocking on DS9's door. Or really the thing to do is to say, thank you, we'll take our engineer. We'll also take his compatriot from the Rutledge. We'll be on our ways. And then you turn Boone over to... Starfleet. Maybe the good people at section, 30, section 32, some section. There's probably some section that could deal with him, is my thinking.
Yeah, and, some office.
Right. As long as you're going to deal with that kind of thing, why not deal with that kind of thing instead of saying, I'm just going to leave this here.
So, everybody is just fine? I guess? Assuming so, let us see what we can take from Tribunal.
The episode is called Tribunal, and we know why the episode is called Tribunal, so we won't spend a lot of time talking about why it's called Tribunal. Instead, we'll talk about the messages, morals, and meanings, and whether the whole thing holds up today. In fact, that is where we begin. Does this episode, Tribunal, John, does this episode hold up as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, it definitely holds up. It's a very interesting look at this powerful piece of propaganda to sway opinions and keep people in line. And that's all very interesting, all very well and good. But for our characters, it's a piece of drama involving Miles O'Brien. So really, that's, as far as the storytelling, as far as the production goes, yes, we take one of our central characters and give him something meaty to chew on, and also do this weird exploration into an alien culture by doing that. Some similarities here, of course, to Chain of Command. You can't ignore that, of course, with Picard being tortured. Very famous episode of TNG. The only thing that felt clunky to me in this episode was the very end, where you have the exposition by Sisko just saying, well, here's what happened, and here's why it happened, and here, that was that. But fine, look, you got to wrap it up at some point. Everything that had led up to that was so good. And man, Fritz Weaver is just amazing. He's so riveting. He's so good. And what a fascinating character that is the type you don't see a lot of on TV. He was just great. And also, we've seen him a few times before, but Richard Poe as Gul Evek, I think this is my favorite performance, just because he had a bit more to do. So my favorite of his so far. So yeah, just a lot of terrific stuff in this episode. A lot of interesting ideas, and very well presented and well performed. I got really no complaints here. How about you?
Yeah, about my only problem is with the end, but for a different reason than you. I don't mind Sisko explaining everything that happened. I'm actually okay with that. I'm a little bothered that, like, Miles O'Brien, you've just been tortured and put on trial for your life. What are you going to do now? I'm going to, vacation land.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, it's weird because this is another one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, all's well that ends well. Yeah, okay, maybe, except he might need to see somebody like
I would say,
four times a week and be medicated for a while.
Yeah, maybe Lagoon is code for therapist. That's what we're hoping.
We call it the Lagoon, right? But it's actually a psych ward on, Tantalus 4.
Nice.
Is that where it is? I don't know. Yeah. But otherwise, I like it. Like I said, I like the moment of, it's so rare that I feel like Miles and Keiko, that those characters actually, and maybe it's the actors, I don't know. It's so rare that I feel anything genuine between those two. And I did in this episode. And that weird, he's like got to be contorted in a strange way, kissing her, but they're laughing. It felt like it was that was a great scene, honestly.
Yeah.
And there are so many times that you watch them and you're like, I don't even know if these two have met.
Right.
And so that was a wonderful thing to see. And then everything else that you mentioned, Gul Evek is honestly one of my favorites. I don't know what it is, because usually you're right. You only get him for like a minute, 2, maybe 5 in an episode, but he's great every time. Yeah. And Kovac was just, did I say that right? Kovat. Excuse me. Yeah, not Kovac. Kovat was just, he is just a fantastic character to take apart. It's a fantastic performance. Just, kind of loving that stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to do messages, or do you want me to move on to like my thing on that?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, I'll hit you with what I think,
and
you wrap this up. So, I mean, I think this is one of those episodes where we haven't used these terms in a long time, but this is not a "you see Timmy." It's not Star Trek necessarily making a statement, and certainly not about show trials or injustice. I don't think that's the core idea here, even though there are interesting ideas that come up from that. And their dive into sort of this Orwell 1984 world that is Cardassia. So they get to ruminate about the weird mess that is the Cardassian way of doing things. And I say mess from our point of view. Clearly, it's working very well for the Cardassians. But it really is a vehicle to tell the story of O'Brien, to serve the drama of the O'Brien story. So that's all very well and good. But a couple of interesting ideas here. One, we've talked a bit about capital punishment before, I think more so when we were talking in TOS. And interesting to me to visit the Cardassians with this point of view, where they want family members to be there so the public can see them weep. And I think I even mentioned at one time when we were talking about capital punishment in our TOS days, that it was always interesting to me that, you go back a couple of hundred years and executions were public things. And I am no fan of capital punishment, and I'm no fan of making that a public thing. But it was an interesting societal construct that sort of drove home the idea that these potentially are your neighbors. These are people from your town, from your society, and this is what's happening to them when they're out of line. It sort of it drove home this connection between the people that was happening to and the people who were watching it. And I remember reading an interesting article about the sociology of all of that, saying that now what we have is when there is capital punishment for a crime, we sort of present it in such a way that it's very easy to dissociate from that person who is being executed. Because there is such a distance, and that person can be painted as a monster, primarily because usually the crimes are monstrous. But it sends a different message then to the people who are reading about it in the news or hearing about it. But there's still a level of distance there that changes the relationship and understanding that we have with how capital punishment is carried out. So interesting that they would create this construct around how the Cardassians do things. The other interesting thing that I thought that is so fascinating and embodied here in Kovat is the idea of the lie that benefits society. Kovat even says, well, think of the children. The truth here doesn't matter. Just think of the children. And to me, there's a funny version of this, and there's a not so funny version of this. And the funny version of this is it's kind of a thing on the internet. It's not a single meme, but a collection of memes when people will go online and they'll post a clearly untrue story that somehow lionizes them or their children or their family members. Look at this great thing that we did. Look at this amazing moment that we had. And then, of course, my favorite response to that is when people realize it's a lie and write in, oh, and then did everybody clap? Is that how this played out? And it's just something where somebody's trying to get across a point, like a moral point or maybe a self-serving point, by telling some clearly BS story about themselves, right? The not so funny version of this to me is the idea that we continue to use stories and sometimes in a religious context and sometimes not, to say, well, we're going to tell this story that is full of little white lies to make a moral point. And I remember, like, David Cross did a great version of this in one of his stand-up acts, where he talks about a minister who was telling a story about a kid who was like a 13-year-old and riding a skateboard, had to go ask the preacher if God liked kids who rode skateboards too. And David Cross does this excellent takedown of saying, okay, well, the story's a lie. The story just from beginning to end is a lie. And there's a problem with that when you're trying to get across a moral story, but the premise of the story is a lie. And I have a big problem with that. So seeing an episode like this where clearly they're in the wrong, clearly the Cardassian system is terrible, even if it's not broken for them, for what they're trying to accomplish, from our point of view, we can very easily say, this is morally repugnant to maintain lies in the interest of, well, it's good for the society. Think of the children. It's good for them. So we'll just keep the lie going because we like the way it works out in the end, that everybody stays in line, everybody does what's expected, and if anybody gets out of line, well, it's very easy from their point of view to just, off with them in a show trial, never have to be dealt with again.
It's interesting, though, you don't think that was the point, or at least one of the points of the episode, because my feeling is it's like, I mean, first of all, that's what, or is it just that that's the kind of thing that both you and I would fixate on? Because this almost seems to me, and I'm not 100% certain I'm using the term correctly, and I apologize, but it almost seems to me to be sort of like a Swiftian treatment of how far things could go. Right. It's like a lot of people like here, and I'll now not sound nearly as intelligent, although I really think this is a big thing. I went to a panel at Comic-Con last year questioning whether Judge Dredd was super cop or satire. And the answer is satire. OK, but I mean, there are lots of people who like read Judge Dredd and think, oh, he's so tough, he's so violent and whatever. And they really love the fact that, he is one man dispensing justice. Which is not what he was meant to be at all. He was meant to be a joke through and through. Yeah. And I mean, the Cardassian system is just believable enough, and yet it's completely unbelievable, and yet you can see it happening, especially when you get speeches like Kovat's. I mean, his, and I assume it's belief. What he says about the Cardassian system of jurisprudence is inspiring. It's uplifting. I mean, if you can believe in it, it's absolutely incredible. Of course, we also know it's bogus, but we happen to know that the guy that they've charged is completely not guilty of the thing that he did, right? Yeah. And yet I could see how such a system could happen. I can see today how such a system could happen because I've been yelled at by lots of people for saying, that seems wrong. And I'm not talking about anything that's happened with this show. I'm talking about other stuff that's happened in my life when I've been fool enough to go on to Twitter and actually express my feeling about something. I've been told to shut up so many times by so many people because they believe what they believe and they won't even hear questioning of what they believe. I mean, do you really think that this was not at least some part of what was intended by the writers? You really don't think they were trying to?
Yeah, no, I do think that it is in there. I do think that the writers are certainly aware of it. Okay. I think that they, the Star Trek, the original series, would give us the you see Timmy moment. And it's the character saying, here's the moral thing at the end of the story, right? And you and I have seen this gray area that DS9 plays in. DS9 just sort of says, here's the thing, this is weird. or this is a morally ambiguous or gray area. And here, as we've said many times before, because Cardassians aren't a real thing and the Deep Space Nine space station isn't a real thing, well, we're forced to look at the Cardassians and say, well, anytime there's an alien species on Star Trek, we have to go, okay, well, this is representative of some part of the human experience.
Right.
So no question about it. You have to take at least pieces of this and go, oh, wow, well, if we continue to tell the lies that we think are beneficial because, well, the needs of the many rely on this lie, then sure, we can find ourselves at this sort of illogical extreme where we're doing horrible, repugnant things, because we feel like the lie and maintaining that order through the lie is more important. I don't think that any of this was lost on the writers. I think that they stopped short of beating us over the head with that kind of classic 60s style "you see Timmy" moment. But I'm really okay with that in this episode, because I think the drama for Miles is front and center. We're probably not going to go back to a Cardassian court like this. I don't know. Maybe I'll be surprised in the next 5 seasons of DS9. But DS9 is not setting itself up as a show about the injustices in the justice system. It's about all the multitudes of this alien culture and how we deal with it, and maybe in a case like this, see pieces of ourselves reflected in it.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. Hey, if you want to check out some really cool stuff that the Roddenberry Podcast Network is doing, there's a fantastic place to do it. podcast.roddenberry.com. Oh, you'll find this show there. You'll find Mission Log Live, Women at Warp, Priority One, and The Trek Files. Podcast.roddenberry.com. If you'd like to help support Mission Log directly, that'd be neat. Patreon.com/missionlog is the place to do that. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM at trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
Next week, the Jem'Hadar.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. While there is a lot to admire about this episode, I think I would prefer a more assertive title. Perhaps, Do or Do Not Tribunal. There is no Tribunal. End transmission.
Podcast.roddenberry.com. The Roddenberry Podcast Network.